Welcome back, my friends. Hope everyone's doing well. Today, we're going to be reloading some 450 Bushmaster. If you've been following along lately, I've been having some functioning issues with my Bear Creek Arsenal upper. We suspect it's a gas issue. If this test fails, we're going to go ahead and pull it apart and check out the gas block and all that fun stuff. So that's the plan if this doesn't work. But I've got a bunch of powder selected here. We have a different bullet once again, and we're going to load up a couple of each. Just pick a few different powder charges working up and see if we can get some cycling and function from our gun. So when I first got the upper, I got a box of the Hornady Black factory ammo with the 250 grain FTX, and I bought a box of those bullets to try and load as well. And the factory ammo was able to cycle the upper, but my hand loads were not with IMR 4227. And I was on the upper end of the powder charge limit with that powder. That one didn't work, so that was my experience so far with a 250 grain bullet. Last week, we tried out a 350 grain bullet with 4 different powders. Only one of those was able to cycle, and that was at the maximum charge, and it was getting up there and kind of spicy in pressure, so that's probably not what I'm trying to do anyways. Again, another fail with 4 different powders and a second bullet. So we went from trying to duplicate the factory loading, that didn't work. We went super heavy with a bunch of different powders, that didn't work. And today we're gonna go super light with the bullet weight and several different powders and see if that works. This is the 200 grain FTX. It was designed for the 460 Smith & Wesson, but that's rated up to like 60,000 PSI or something crazy. And we're only pushing 38,000 here with the Bushmaster. So it should work, right? I've seen a couple other people reloading these, and some crazy guy on the interwebs loaded it up to 3,000 feet per second out of his bolt gun. Now, I don't recommend that at all. You're crazy. He called them suicide runs. It's crazy. Go look it up. It's a pretty good read. Anyways, I'm not trying any of that crazy stuff. We're just trying to see if I can get my upper to function, right? So we've got 4 different powders. I'm just going to pick a starting load, go up in half grain or whole grain increments, fire off the 5 shots with that powder, and see how it runs. I'll be collecting velocity along the way and not trying to shoot for a group, but I'll be shooting it at paper just to see, if it lands on the paper at all, if it groups at all, if it's all over the place. We'll get into all that fun stuff. Here we have my notes so far, and when I was doing some research on the subject. We've got our trim length and all that, so I've picked out some brass that's within that spec. We've also primed our brass this far, and these are the powders that would probably work in the Bushmaster here. So I've got them listed by their burn rate. So here today we picked Shooter's World Heavy Pistol, H110, Shooter's World SOCOM, and Shooter's World Blackout. That leaves us with probably 4 more different powders we can test at a later time. But anyways, here's the charges we were able to find. SOCOM, we're going to start out at 43.5, go up to 45.5. Blackout, 44.5 up to 46.5. Shooter's World Heavy Pistol, 31.5 up to 33.5. And H110, 40 grains up to 42 grains. We're going to go in half grain increments. So if we see any pressure signs, it shouldn't be super abrupt going in half grain increments, but we should also cover quite a bit of ground. And here we have the projected velocities. This is what Shooter's World says that this load will give them with a full metal jacket, 2,500 feet per second at their maximum charge, which I think was a little bit higher than this one. And then I used Gordon reloading tool with the other powders here. And so we're expecting around 2,300, maybe 2,400 on the high end. Who knows? Maybe SOCOM will blow them all out of the water. That'd be interesting to see. So let's get loading and see what happens, right? So here we have our dummy round and our Lee seating die there set up. This one doesn't have a built-in crimp, which is good because I'm pretty low and almost touching the shell holder with the ram ran down. And we're almost maxed out here on the stem, so not a lot of play left in it. But it's good enough to get us to what we need, which is 2.2 inches. Here we've got our RCBS 505 beam scale set up. And here we have 20 pieces of Hornady 450 Bushmaster brass. There goes my notebook. And we've already been sized, primed, and now expanded at the mouth, ready to accept powder and bullets. First up is H110. And pretty much all the powders today are going to look a lot like this. They're all ball powders. So let's get on with it, and we'll kind of look at our case fill as we go. So before we get started, I'm going to have my brass all separated here in the loading block, which is just from some 45 ammo from the factory. Anyways, if you have multiple powders you're going to try and load, keep them separated. You should probably actually keep those off the table. But I'm using H110 now. These other three, I'm going to throw this little shop rag over just so I know not to play with them. And as I use them, I'll take them off the bench. So we're getting started with H110, and all the others are far away. Here is a look at our case fill with H110. Here is our maximum charge of 42 grains. I have that marked on the outside. And then you see on the other side of this case, we have the seating depth of the bullet. So we have just a little bit of room left, but this is still quite a large charge of H110. That's another reason we're using our Magnum primers. I've heard of people getting hang fires with some of these powders, so I went with Magnum primers. Anyways, we still have some room to work up if we don't see any pressure, and if we're getting function, we can go ahead and test some groups and all that. But it's good to know we're not quite at 100% fill, and we can work up a little bit if we need to. But of course, we're going to start low and see how that treats us before jumping all the way up here. Anyways, on to our next powder, and H110 is going off the table. I lied, actually. I did put the H110 away, but we still have to seat our bullets, so we're going to go ahead and get all these. And I've already got my seating die set up, so let's run these real quick. Make sure we got the correct overall length, and then on to the next powder. I was just giving them a little shake to hear if we had any room left, and yeah, this one still has a little bit of capacity left over, so a little bit of wiggle room. But again, we're going to start low and look for pressure, see what happens. Our next powder is Shooter's World SBR SOCOM. Another very fine ball powder. You can see it does have a couple longer little sticks in there, but it's not extruded or anything. They're just kind of stretched out flakes or balls or... Oop, can you say that? We're done pouring our powder for our SBR SOCOM, and there's our maximum charge of 45.5. And compared to our seating depth, that's going to be pretty close, which should be right on the money. That's probably going to be pretty hot. But again, that's why we're going to start low and work our way up, and that's why we're doing this sort of stuff. So even if my gun doesn't function, I'll know where I start to see pressure signs, and then whenever I get that issue sorted out, we can revisit these, and I'll know where I can stop as far as moving up the charge weights. Anyways, let's get these bullets seated, and then on to our next powder after that. All right, all of our SOCOM loads are ready to go. Well, we still have to crimp, of course, but we are loaded up. And I gave it a little shake, and there's still a little bit of case capacity left over after it settled, so no problem there as far as being at capacity, which isn't a problem anyways. Being compressed isn't a bad thing, but something to watch out for. Anyways, on to, what are we at? Shooter's World Blackout. Up next, a look at Shooter's World Blackout. This is our slowest burning powder today with a maximum charge of 46.5 grains. So here's our Shooter's World Blackout. This is going to be our fullest case capacity, 46.5 grains. We'll see if it settles at all once I get the bullets seated, but I'll let you know if anything weird happens. But anyways, we'll get on with it. Okay, so here is Shooter's World Heavy Pistol, our last powder for the day. It has the smallest balls of them all. It is the fastest burning. We're going to be starting down at 31.5 grains and going up a little bit from there. Definitely going to have the lowest case fill, but they do note on their little, blurb in the PDF about this powder that it works well with reduced capacity loads, so we should still be getting a nice full burn, especially in an 18-inch barrel. So let's see what it can do for us. All right, we've got our factory crimp dice set up here at our saved setting based on there, and let's see if we pass our chamber gauge. Right in and right out. And not too much crimp, just enough to close up the flare and then kind of get a grip on that bullet. But yeah, who knows? We can tighten it later if we need to. We can loosen it if we need to. Just make sure you don't do it too much because it is head spacing off of the case mount there. But yeah, make sure you pass your gauge. I've already tested the dummy round off the magazine to feed through the gun, so that is no problem. Let me get the rest of these crimped and we will head out to the range finally. So how about a quick spot check with the case gauge? We should be good to go now. Oh yes, come on, perfect. Yes, just perfect. So does anybody know of a good MTM case that'll hold these? Maybe a shorter one, because right now I'm using my 308 box here. So if anybody knows of a better case for these to hold my ammo in, let me know. It could even be a little 20 rounder, because once you take the bullet out of these, they fall down in there and they're real hard to get out unless you just dump it over. But I've got 308 loads in here I'm working on as well, so it's kind of hard to just dump over, and you know what I'm saying. So if you could recommend a better little ammo box, let me know. Thank you. Anyways, out to the range. Let's do it. And we are back from the range with some more, more results, I guess. We barely had some cycling with the H110 loads. Everything else failed to successfully cycle a new round or kick out many of the spent ones. A couple of them did, a couple of them didn't. But anyways, now we know that we're going to have to start playing with our gas block, which isn't a big deal. So we're going to get onto that later. But anyways, more on the range trip. Here is our target. Of course, I was just testing function, so this was sitting at 50 yards, and you can see pretty much just a vertical spread because these velocities are all over the place. And I don't know if that's the chronograph readings I was getting. I'm pretty sure we're pretty much inaccurate. I didn't have the little sunshade visory thing, so I've heard that can interfere with your readings. And so I don't have a whole lot of faith in these velocity numbers. And the main thing is that we learned whether or not it was functioning with a whole bunch of powders that should probably be able to function. And so that's what we were here for mainly. But anyways, if any of the chronograph data is worth anything, it'll be hard to tell because a few of them are pretty weird. But anyways, let's get started with our first one, H110. So here with H110, you can see the chronograph goes from our lowest charge weight at pretty much one of the highest velocities, 2447. You go up and somehow it's down 300 feet. You go up a little bit more and it's a little higher than our first charge, up to 41.5. We now have our highest velocity. And then finally our highest charge somehow gives us nearly our lowest velocity of the day. So I'm gonna pretty much not take any of this chronograph information for, I don't think it's worth anything really. But out of all of our testing, this one did, I think, cycle a few rounds off the magazine, and the next one's into the chamber. But I don't think it locked back on the very last round, so still having issues there. But out of everything I've tested so far, this H110 has been the most successful. And we didn't see any pressure signs until our maximum charge, which, obviously that's probably not accurate, but there's just barely slight flattening of the primer on this maximum charge here in the top left. Otherwise, H110 was the best of the day, and it just kind of goes downhill from there. Right after that, Shooter's World Blackout. I think that's the slowest burning powder of the day, actually. We went from the fastest, or one of the faster to the slowest. And the chronograph data almost seems logical. it's pretty stagnant around this 2150 area, 2179, 2165. So again, a 2-grain swing and pretty much no change in the chronograph data. So I don't know if I trust that a whole lot, especially with this dip here, and then the next one is even low again. Actually, they're all low except the very last charge. So it goes from here to lower and then higher at the very last charge. So very weird stuff here. And again, no pressure until our maximum charge at 46.5. No function. And I did move the chronograph back a little, but still I don't trust any of that. That's all very weird, unless that's like the widest velocity node in the world. You just throw anything from 44.5 to 46.5 and you're going to be going 2150. That's kind of weird. Who knows? Anyways, moving right along. After we take a look at our cases, our second row here is the Blackout. And again, just barely flattened primers, not really flat at all. They still have plenty of room around them in the primer pocket, so no real pressure signs. That's good to know. But again, no function. After Blackout, we used Shooter's World SOCOM. This had the highest projected velocity of 2,500 feet per second. Chronograph actually looked kind of like it's what it was supposed to do. I did move it back again from the last group, so it's probably out at 10 feet now like it's supposed to be, but still no function. And our primer was starting to flatten at the maximum charge. But it looks like here we start at 2400, and then it looks like maybe there's a node here between these two charge weights, and then it jumps up about 40 or 35 feet per second there to this other, what could be a node between these two charge weights. Very interesting, and also the highest velocity by what could be a couple hundred feet per second. Kind of interesting. Too bad we didn't get the gun to cycle. The third row here, or column, is it a column or a row? This third one here was the Shooter's World SOCOM. Again, the primers look pretty much the same throughout the entire day. I wouldn't say there's any excessive pressure signs here. This one is a little more, I guess you would call it flattened than these, but anyways, no big deal. But on with the next one. And so our last powder of the day causes the most confusion and questioning. And so we'll just jump right in. Our lowest charge weight gave the highest velocity. Our highest charge weight gave the lowest velocity. Now I went back and watched the video of me loading it and comparing the case capacity. And from what I could tell, I saw the 32 grain charge in the back of the case, while I had the highest charge sitting next to our dummy round. So I'm pretty sure I had them labeled correctly and in the right order, but I don't know what was going on here. We went all the way from 2405 down to 2271, 2185, 2164, and then our highest charge was only 2053. A 350 foot difference. That's pretty crazy. So yeah, no function once again, and no pressure signs. We started nice and low on this one. I think they recommend up to like 38 or something silly with accurate number 9. Again, it's not the same powder, but it's a good starting point if you don't have data for your Shooter's World heavy pistol. Just go a little bit below your accurate number 9 data. Anyways, we're way below that, so no pressure signs here, but no function either. Boo-hoo. And here are the heavy pistol loads. Still pretty round primers, but I cannot explain the odd charge weight versus velocity there. So if anyone has ever seen that, let me know. It's kind of weird, but please fill us in with your story, okay? All right, so in conclusion, once again, a total flop on the functioning. I even changed my lowers. I went from the A2 lower to a carbine lower, which was a rifle buffer versus a carbine buffer, so on and so forth. I thought that might help. It did not. So next step is to pull off the handguard and start playing around with the gas block, make sure that's aligned, and perhaps even open up the gas port hole just a little bit. I've been reading about that. So we'll probably get into that here soon, and hopefully that will fix our issues. Anyways, if you enjoy this sort of content, feel free to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you are not so far. You can also help support the channel over at patreon.com/dummyround. And once again, thanks for hanging out. We appreciate it, and we will see you in the next video. Have a good one.